So imagine, like, wading through knee-deep floodwaters in the middle of a New Orleans hurricane.
Yeah.
The rain is just blinding. It's coming down in sheets that actually sting your face.
Yeah, the wind is just howling, right? Throwing debris down the historic streets of the French Quarter.
Exactly. Everything around you is completely thoroughly soaked. But now, imagine looking through that thick gray mist and seeing a man leaning against a wrought iron lamppost, and he is just, well, he's completely dried out.
Oh, wow. Just completely mummified.
Yeah, a literal leathery husk resting in the middle of a torrential downpour. So today on the deep dive, we are looking at a physical impossibility.
It really represents the ultimate biological paradox. I mean, we're looking at a completely desiccated environment occupying the exact same physical space as a totally saturated one.
Right. Which makes no sense.
Not at all. The laws of thermodynamics, at least as we commonly apply them, dictate that extreme moisture and extreme dryness simply cannot coexist in that manner without, one neutralizing the other.
Yeah, which is why today's mission is taking us right into the heart of that very paradox. We are sorting through this massive stack of incident reports, autopsy notes, and command transcripts from, honestly, one of the most mind-bending case files the Behavioral Probability Unit has ever handled.
It's a wild one.
It really is. So we are heading straight into those flooded, rainy, and highly mysterious streets of New Orleans, Louisiana.
And we're dealing with a city firmly in the grip of a severe tropical storm. I mean, flash floods have completely overwhelmed the historic drainage systems, and there's a massive storm surge pushing in from the Gulf.
Yeah, water just cascading off the balconies, bubbling up from the storm grates, and turning the usually bustling tourist streets into rushing rivers. You literally cannot take a breath without inhaling mist.
Right, the air's just thick with it.
Exactly. And yet, in the middle of this overwhelming atmospheric moisture, the BPU is investigating a case of rapid total mummification.
Okay.
Okay, let's unpack this because the visceral details of this crime scene are straight out of a nightmare.
They really are.
We're looking at the field notes from Agent Hatch, the tactical lead for the team, and the scene he wades into on Bourbon Street is just staggering.
Well, the contradiction is immediate in his report. I mean, Hatch is literally fighting the current just to walk. The water is up to his shins.
Right, and leaning against a lamppost in the middle of this rushing water is the victim. It's blind Willie Jefferson, who is this legendary local jazz musician known to everyone in the neighborhood.
But Willie doesn't look like a drowning victim.
No, not at all. According to Hatch's field notes, he looks like a dry, leathery statue. Like his skin is completely parched and stretched tight over his bones.
The visual contrast alone just forces your brain to stall. A dehydrated husk surrounded by thousands of gallons of moving water defies basic logic.
Yeah, the notes say his eyes were just gone, shriveled away into the sockets. Even the brass trumpet he was holding, which, keep in mind, was out in the pouring rain, is bone dry inside the bell.
That is just so unnerving.
Right. Hatch wrote a line in his field notes that really stuck with me. He said, "It's like he was standing in the center of a localized sun, but the rain around him never stopped falling."
Wow.
But standard mummification takes weeks, right, if not months, in an arid desert environment. If Willie was transformed in under 60 seconds, heat couldn't possibly be the mechanism.
No, absolutely not. Dr. Thorne, the medical examiner, must have known he was looking at a chemical reaction, like a desiccant strong enough to rip water straight through the skin.
Oh, exactly.
And Dr. Eris Thorne's autopsy confirms that suspicion entirely. What's fascinating here is, well, we naturally assume heat is the primary mechanism for dehydration. Like we bake things to evaporate the moisture.
Right.
But Dr. Thorne found zero thermal damage to Willie Jefferson's tissues. None. Instead, he identified a lethal chemical gradient, a process he officially classified as ionic osmotic shock.
Ionic osmotic shock. Okay, let's break the physics of that down for everyone listening, because while it sounds incredibly complex, the foundational mechanism is really just osmosis, right?
Exactly. So osmosis governs the movement of water across a semi-permeable membrane, like human skin or a cellular wall, from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration.
Because the biology is constantly trying to find an equilibrium. Like our cells regulate this internal pressure so we don't dry out or swell up and burst.
Right. Which makes us walking reservoirs for this weapon, considering human biology is roughly 60% water.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is. Our bodies rely entirely on maintaining that precise hydrostatic balance. And Dr. Thorne's autopsy revealed that Willie's cellular membranes weren't simply dehydrated, they were violently shattered.
Wait, shattered.
Yeah, the lipid bilayers, the actual structural walls of his cells, were physically ripped apart at a microscopic level. The salt used in the killer's chemical cocktail was so extremely hygroscopic, meaning it actively attracts and holds water molecules from its surrounding environment, that it created a massive, desperate void outside the body.
So, think of a human cell like a water balloon. Osmosis is usually just water slowly seeping through the rubber over time. But what this chemical did was essentially put that water balloon next to a black hole.
That is a perfect analogy.
The pull was so violent and instantaneous that the cell wall just shredded.
Right. The chemical gradient was of such extreme steepness that the water inside Willie's cells had no choice but to evacuate instantly. It pulled the fluid through his skin, his lungs, and his eyes at the speed of a bullet.
So the storm's moisture was effectively bypassed while Willie was bled completely dry of his own biology.
Exactly. Bled dry of his own biology.
That is terrifying on a totally different level. It's not just terminating a life, it's a physical erasure of their physical composition.
Yeah, it's brutal.
But if a chemical gradient is pulling the water, the delivery mechanism is the real nightmare. I mean, deploying a massive concentrated chemical cloud of a hyper-thirsty substance in the middle of a hurricane seems completely counterintuitive.
You would think so, yeah.
Right, because you would assume the wind and the rain would instantly dilute any chemical agent, just soaking it before it even reached a target.
And that assumption is exactly why the BPU agents were initially stumped. Structural engineer Damian Cross analyzed the physical environment around the body, focusing on the storm drains near the lamppost where Willie was found.
And what did he find?
Well, Cross discovered those drains were coated in a thick, crystalline residue that did not match any standard city runoff.
Ah, okay. He analyzed the residue and found a proprietary superabsorbent polymer, or SAP, mixed with a highly concentrated ionic salt.
Right.
I have to jump in with an analogy here, because when I read superabsorbent polymer mixed with salt, my brain immediately went to those little silica gel packets you find in a new pair of shoes.
Oh, the ones with "do not eat" printed on them.
Yes, exactly. Their entire function is to absorb ambient humidity to protect the leather from mold.
Yep. Silica gel is a standard industrial desiccant operating on the exact same principle. The killer essentially engineered a weaponized industrial-grade version of that concept.
So it's a giant lethal silica packet. But here is where the logic hits a wall for me.
Okay, go ahead.
If you deploy a desiccant in a storm, the ambient moisture would ruin it instantly. Like the rain would just saturate the polymer the second it hit the air.
Yeah.
Unless there's some sort of protective barrier, like a shell that only breaks under extreme conditions.
Exactly. The forensic findings from Agent Jax Reed confirm that exact mechanism. Jax was tracking atmospheric ion changes and chemical dispersal patterns, and she realized the killer coated the polymer in a microscopic, water-soluble shell that is incredibly dense.
Okay, so it protects the chemical.
Right. Normal ambient humidity, even at a sweltering 90%, isn't enough to dissolve it. It literally requires the sheer physical volume and pressure of 100% saturation, like a torrential downpour, to breach that shell.
Oh, wow. And once the water breaks through, the polymer violently expands.
Exactly. The storm isn't fighting the weapon. The storm is the actual trigger.
The tropical storm is the catalyst for the entire reaction. That's insane.
When the mist hits that wall of total saturation, the SAP and the ionic salts undergo a rapid, violent chemical expansion. It creates a localized hyperdry zone.
A hyperdry zone.
Yeah. For a radius around the deployment point, the air becomes a molecular vacuum. It is so chemically desperate for moisture that it doesn't just pull the rain out of the air, it aggressively sucks the life out of anything biological it touches.
Right, because human blood, human tissue is an easier, purer source of water than muddy rainwater.
You hit the nail on the head. It rips the purest water out of the most immediate, accessible source. The human body presents far less resistance than the ambient environment once the lipid bilayers are compromised.
That is horrifyingly brilliant. It takes the environment, the very thing people are already battling to survive in a flood, and turns it into the murder weapon itself.
It's incredibly dark.
So the BPU then had to figure out how this mist was being distributed, and Jax Reed discovered the killer had hijacked the city's mosquito control fogging trucks. You know, the ones that normally drive down residential streets, spraying a fine mist of insecticide.
Right. The killer retrofitted these trucks, completely replacing the insecticide with this proprietary desiccant mist.
Which brings up a critical behavioral shift. Modifying municipal infrastructure requires deep technical knowledge and extensive planning.
Oh, absolutely. This level of orchestration indicates a highly driven, mission-oriented offender.
Yeah, the killer's choice of a desiccant wasn't just logistical, it was deeply psychological. Profiler Elias Vance realized exactly what the behavioral probability unit was up against.
Right, because the unsub calls himself the alchemist.
Yes, Vance discovered that the alchemist isn't just killing people, he is distilling them.
Now, distilling is a heavily loaded term from a behavioral analysis standpoint. In classical alchemy, distilling is the process of removing impurities to find a base, pure element.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Elias Vance cracks the killer's manifesto, and it reveals a sprawling, terrifying delusion.
It's quite the read.
It is. The alchemist views New Orleans as a city that is literally swamped by sin and filth. He believes the physical water in the city, the floods, the humidity, the river itself, is fundamentally corrupted by the moral decay of its inhabitants.
Right. He views a city sitting below sea level, relying on levees and pumps, as a literal abomination.
So he doesn't view himself as a murderer. He views himself as a purifier. He is extracting the impure water from the residents to cleanse the city's soul.
And that's the scary part, because a single target murderer might stalk someone in an alley for revenge or act on a localized impulse.
Right.
But a purifier operates on a different axis entirely. A purifier wants an audience, and more importantly, a purifier wants scale. That psychological obsession with mass purification elevates this offender from a local threat to someone operating a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, scale is the ultimate threat here. Which brings us to the absolute nightmare scenario unfolding at the BPU mobile command.
The ticking clock.
Exactly. We are looking at the real-time intelligence logs from the final pages of the case file. Agent Jax Reed is monitoring the city's grid, and she suddenly tracks a massive deployment of those hijacked fogging trucks. Not just one truck, a whole fleet of them.
And they are rolling straight toward the historic Treem district.
Now, the Treem is one of those culturally significant and densely populated neighborhoods in New Orleans. During a massive flood, its narrow historic streets and dense housing make navigation incredibly difficult.
Right.
And the situation escalates from difficult to catastrophic. Because Agent Damian cross-references the fleet's trajectory with city event permits.
Yeah, and what he finds is just devastating.
At that exact moment, despite the raging storm, a massive jazz funeral is starting in the Treem to honor blind Willie Jefferson. For anyone listening who hasn't experienced one, a jazz funeral in New Orleans isn't a quiet affair sitting in a chapel.
No, it's a massive, moving, vibrant procession.
Yeah, exactly. There are brass bands playing dirges, followed by the second line of mourners dancing, marching, and celebrating the life of the deceased. We are talking about thousands of people marching shoulder to shoulder, completely packed into these historic streets.
And those streets are currently serving as a bottleneck. I mean, the rising floodwaters have severely compromised the crowd's mobility. They are essentially funneled into a confined space with limited avenues of escape.
Now, if you're listening to this and wondering why an umbrella or raincoat wouldn't just protect the crowd from the mist, you have to remember the nature of a 100% humidity environment. The mist isn't just falling on them from above, they're actively breathing it in.
Right, it's suspended in the ambient air.
It's an invisible wall of microscopic vacuums. If the crowd is trapped by waist-high floodwaters, they can barely walk, let alone run. And we already know from Dr. Thorne's autopsy that this desiccant mist induces ionic osmotic shock in under 60 seconds.
It's so fast.
If those trucks deploy, how can they possibly evacuate? I mean, it's a literal death trap disguised as a parade.
Yeah, and this raises an important question regarding the tactical options available to the behavioral probability unit. Elias Vance notes in the command transcript that if the alchemist releases that mist into a crowd of that density, the chemical reaction will be catastrophic.
Just instant devastation.
The crowd won't even have time to register the threat. The air will be sucked from their lungs and the moisture ripped from their cells. They will turn into a graveyard of statues before the first person even hits the ground.
Oh, man.
Furthermore, the BPU tactical teams can't simply shoot the trucks to stop them. Puncturing the pressurized tanks would instantly release the chemical payload into the storm, triggering the exact reaction they are trying to prevent.
Right. The ticking clock is officially set. The command logs end with Agent Hatch frantically mobilizing the tactical teams to try and intercept the fleet of trucks before they can reach the perimeter of the parade.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Totally. Navigating a flooded city in heavy tactical vehicles to cleanly disable a chemical weapon, the margins for error are basically zero.
It represents the ultimate test for the team. I mean, they have the psychological profile, they understand the underlying science, and they know the target location.
But possessing all of that intelligence doesn't stop the chemical reaction if that mist hits the saturated air.
Exactly.
And the case file cuts off right there, leaving you entirely breathless.
Right.
But think about the terrifying vulnerability of our own biology for a second.
It really makes you pause.
It does. We walk around every day taking our physical form completely for granted. We are mostly water. It is the very substance keeping our hearts beating, our lungs expanding, and our brains functioning.
Yeah.
This case, this absolutely twisted deployment of industrial chemistry, proves that the very substance keeping us alive can be turned against us in the blink of an eye. It can be weaponized to pull us apart from the inside out.
It forces a complete reevaluation of what constitutes a threat. When the environment, it's the rain, the humidity, the very air you breathe becomes the trigger for your destruction, there is literally no safe harbor to retreat to.
So what does this all mean? It means that human fragility isn't just about avoiding physical force or blunt trauma. It's about the delicate chemical balance that keeps us intact and how easily a brilliant fractured mind can exploit it. What are the odds that the behavioral probability unit can stop a chemical storm before a whole parade turns to dust? Keep your water bottles full. We'll see you in part 2.
But before we sign off, there is one final haunting detail from the alchemist's methodology to mull over.
Oh, right.
If this chemical storm is designed to pull the water from human biology in mere seconds, where does all that water actually go?
Wait, yeah.
The superabsorbent polymer captures it. It doesn't just vanish into the ether. It is actively stored. So if his true goal is distilling the city's sinners, what exactly is he planning to do with the thousands of gallons of impure water he extracts from an entire parade of people?